Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that, well, it touches every single one of us, fear. We'll be exploring how using audio journaling, and specifically we'll talk about Chosen, can be maybe a surprisingly powerful way to understand what drives our fears and how to navigate them more effectively.
Absolutely. Fear is such a primal response, isn't it? I mean, it's designed for our survival.
Right.
Think about it from the most basic level, like a snail withdrawing from something it perceives as a threat, all the way up to the really complex anxieties we grapple with in our modern lives. It's fundamental, part of our biology, this built-in alarm system.
And it's fascinating how that same intense feeling, the one we call fear, can sometimes be flipped on its head, experienced as something positive.
Yeah, like excitement.
Yeah, exactly. That thrill you get from a scary movie or, the excitement of a roller coaster. It seems like when we feel a sense of control, even in those really heightened moments, the experience just shifts.
That's a crucial point, the control aspect, that sense of agency, of feeling like, okay, I can manage this situation. That can indeed transform fear into maybe anticipation or excitement.
No.
But yeah, when we feel overwhelmed, totally powerless against whatever we perceive as a threat, that's when fear can become a really significant obstacle, a real blocker.
So our goal in this deep dive is to give you some really practical tools and frameworks, and especially thinking about how you can use the Chosen audio journaling app to really get under the hood of your fears and, build a better understanding of them.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's dive into our first framework then. It's called Fear Setting, and it comes from Tim Ferriss's blog, quite well known.
Right. Fear setting. What's so insightful about it, I think, is its core idea that what often looks like optimism, or maybe even just putting things off.
Yeah.
Procrastination.
Yeah, I know that one.
Right. It might actually be fear in disguise. As the blog cleverly reminds us with that Yoda quote, named must your fear be before banish it you can.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real wisdom in that, kind of quirky phrasing aside.
It really hits home, doesn't it? The blog shares this really compelling story about a lawyer, Hans Keeling.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
He was in a career that was just draining him, completely unfulfilling. And it wasn't until he took this huge leap, literally, he went paragliding.
Wow.
Yeah, that he realized the risks he'd been avoiding in other areas of his life, they weren't nearly as terrifying as the kind of stagnation he was living in.
And his realization is so powerful. He recognized that all those years he'd spent in that job, the cost of his inaction. He felt it was almost like being living dead. That's a strong phrase.
It really is.
It just underscores this important point. Sometimes, by not facing our fears, we end up paying a much, much higher price down the line.
Exactly. So fear setting is all about cutting through that vague sense of unease, that anxiety, by really, really clearly defining your nightmare scenario.
The absolute worst thing.
The absolute worst possible outcome you can imagine. The idea is once you bring it into sharp focus, it often loses a lot of its power. It's like, finally seeing that shadow in the dark for what it really is, just a coat hanging on the door or something.
And this connects really well with a quote from Seneca that the blog highlights. It's something like, set aside a certain number of days, be content with the scantiest fare, with coarse dress, saying, is this the condition that I feared?
Right. Practice the hardship.
Exactly. It's about proactively facing those discomforts we imagine, the things we're afraid of experiencing, and seeing if they truly have the hold on us that we think they do. Often they don't.
So the blog lays out a really structured approach for this, a Q&A questions and actions framework. The first crucial step is to really define your nightmare.
Get specific.
Yeah, get really specific. What's the absolute worst that could happen if you went for that thing you're considering? What are all the doubts, all the what-ifs that pop into your head? The suggestion is to really paint a detailed picture and even think about how permanent would the impact be? Maybe read it on a scale of 1 to 10. And crucially, how likely is it to actually occur?
Right, because often the worst case is pretty improbable. And building on that definition, that worst case scenario, the next logical step is to think about how you would repair the damage.
Okay.
Even if that nightmare scenario did play out, what concrete, actionable steps could you take to minimize the negative impact?
Right.
Or, to bounce back? Just brainstorming those solutions can be incredibly effective in reducing the anxiety that comes with all that uncertainty.
Then it's important to look at the other side of the coin, the probable positive outcomes.
Right, the upside.
Exactly. Once you've stared down the nightmare, what are the more likely positive results? Both internally, maybe just a boost in your confidence, feeling good about yourself, and externally, what kind of impact could these positive outcomes have, again, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10?
And the blog even suggests asking yourself, Have others with maybe less experience or fewer resources, have they achieved similar things?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it can be a real confidence builder, seeing that it's possible, that others have done it.
There's also a very practical prompt in there that focuses on a job loss scenario.
Even if it's not what you're currently considering.
Right. Even if you're not thinking about leaving your job, just considering, okay, how would I regain financial stability if I were unexpectedly let go? And applying those initial 3 questions, the nightmare, the repair, the positives to that specific scenario, can really strengthen your sense of resilience, your preparedness for, unexpected challenges life throws at you.
And this next question, this one really makes you think. What are you putting off due to fear?
Oh, yeah.
The blog makes a powerful point here that often the very things we are most afraid to do, they're the things we most need to do.
Like that difficult conversation, maybe.
Exactly. Or that risky phone call, that application, whatever it is. It's the fear of the unknown outcome that just keeps us stuck sometimes.
Which leads directly to considering the often overlooked cost of inaction.
This is huge.
It really is. It's not just about the potential downsides of taking action. It's equally important, maybe more important, to really evaluate what you're losing financially, emotionally, maybe even physically by just staying put over the next year, 5 years, maybe even 10 years.
Yeah, the blog powerfully argues that inaction can, in many cases, actually be the greatest risk we take, leading to potential regret, missed opportunities.
That living dead feeling Hans Keeling talked about.
Totally.
And finally, the framework asks the direct question. What are you waiting for? If the answer isn't a truly concrete, logical reason, like, I need to save X amount of money first, the blog suggests it's likely just fear dressed up as waiting for the perfect time.
Which never comes.
Exactly. It really pushes you to consider taking action now rather than perpetually waiting for some ideal moment that might never actually arrive.
So that's a really comprehensive framework, the fear-setting thing. Very practical for directly engaging with our fears on an analytical level.
But analyzing isn't everything, right?
Right. As important as analyzing our fears is, so is actually processing the emotions that come along with them. And this is where journaling, especially the kind highlighted in articles from, say, Arista Recovery and Very Well Mind, becomes such a valuable tool.
Absolutely. These sources really emphasize that journaling provides this safe and private space to really explore our inner landscape, our thoughts, our feelings. And this act of externalizing what's going on inside, just getting it out, can lead to greater emotional clarity and even sometimes a noticeable reduction in feelings like anxiety or depression or hostility.
It's like having a candid conversation with yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, but you're capturing it. And with something like Chosen, you're capturing it in your own voice, which adds another layer, I think.
That's a good point. And what's particularly interesting is that the act of expressive writing, or in this case, expressive speaking into your journal, simply getting those feelings out, can actually help break those repetitive cycles, those obsessive thought loops that often fuel our fears.
Right, the hamster wheel.
Exactly that. It fosters a greater sense of self-awareness. It lets you sort of observe your emotions more objectively rather than being completely swept away by them.
Yeah.
And this, in turn, significantly contributes to better emotional regulation.
And it's not just about that immediate release either, is it? Reviewing past journal entries, which, Chosen makes incredibly easy with its search functionality. You can just look up keywords.
Oh, that's useful.
Yeah, it can provide really valuable insights over time. It allows you to see patterns in your reactions, understand your common triggers, maybe see how far you've come. And it promotes that ongoing emotional processing. It might even create the space and clarity you need to realize, hey, maybe I need to seek some social support here.
And connecting this to the sort of the underlying biology of fear, there's a WCSAP article that explains how the amygdala, that small but really powerful part of our brain.
The threat detector.
Yeah, exactly. The initial threat detector. It triggers those fight, flight, freeze, or even collapse responses. And journaling, particularly when we've experienced something traumatic, it might be kind of stuck in those freeze or collapse states. It can be a powerful way to process the complex emotions tied to those responses and maybe begin to move through them.
It's also been shown, interestingly, that the act of journaling can actually help activate the parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest system.
Right. Think of it as your body's natural counterbalance to the stress response it promotes relaxation, helps bring things back to a state of calm. Just the act of journaling itself can do that.
So, Very Well Mind introduces a couple of specific journaling techniques that seem particularly relevant when we're dealing with fear. One is free writing.
Okay, what's that involve?
Basically, you just record your thoughts as they come, no self-censorship, no editing, just let it flow for a set period, maybe 15 or 20 minutes.
Just talking.
Just talking into your audio journal. The goal isn't perfect sentences or profound insights necessarily, but just to tap into your inner thoughts and gain a deeper understanding of what's really going on under the surface. And then afterward, listening back to your recording can often reveal surprising connections or insights you weren't aware of while speaking.
And the second technique they mention is keeping a thought diary. This sounds a bit more structured.
It is. It's actually a really foundational tool in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Okay.
This involves actively tracking specific thought patterns, especially those related to your fears, noticing when they come up, what triggers them, and then, importantly, learning to critically evaluate the beliefs that underlie those thoughts.
Challenging them.
Exactly. Over time, this process can help you challenge and maybe reframe negative or irrational fears that might be holding you back. Asking yourself, is this thought actually true? What's the evidence?
Okay, so we have these really powerful frameworks, fear setting to help us analyze our fears in a structured way, and then various audio journaling techniques like free writing or a thought diary to help us process the often intense emotions that come with fear.
Right. Analysis and processing, both key.
But how do these concepts really translate into real-life experiences? Does this stuff actually work?
Well, let's circle back to Hans Keeling's story for a moment, the paragliding lawyer.
Okay.
Well, his paragliding experience wasn't, a formal fear-setting exercise like Tim Ferriss outlines it on a worksheet.
Right, he wasn't filling out boxes midair.
Probably not. But it served a very similar purpose, didn't it?
Yeah.
He deliberately confronted a significant physical fear. And the realization that the worst outcome, which I guess was crashing, didn't happen, and even if it had, maybe it wouldn't be the absolute end. That realization had this profound ripple effect.
It led to a major positive life change, leaving the job, starting a surf company, and he reported a greater sense of inner peace.
Exactly. His deep dissatisfaction with his job, that was a powerful underlying fear too, right? The fear of a life unlived, perhaps. The fear of regret. By confronting a more immediate, tangible fear, jumping off a cliff, basically he gained a new perspective on the other risks he was avoiding and the real cost of that avoidance.
The blog also shares another really compelling anecdote about a guy named Jean-Marc Haché. He volunteered in Ghana during a period of significant political instability and severe drought. Real hardship.
Wow, okay.
And he faced genuine difficulty, lack of basic comforts. But his key takeaway was, and I'm quoting roughly here, the worst really wasn't that bad.
Perspective shift.
Big time. He came to realize that the fundamental things that make life worthwhile are actually quite simple. Basic necessities, good company, human connection, and that so many of our modern fears center around losing things that aren't truly essential for a fulfilling life.
That really reframes things, doesn't it? Our fears of discomfort versus real deprivation. And it's worth highlighting, too, that on Tim Ferriss's blog post about fear setting, there are just countless comments.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, tons of them. People sharing how they actively use the fear-setting exercise to break through all sorts of fears, making significant career changes, finally pursuing long-held travel dreams, tackling really personal internal struggles, relationship issues, creative blocks. These real-world examples just underscore the practical and sometimes transformative potential of these frameworks. It's not just theory.
Okay, so we have a good understanding now of these frameworks, fear setting, emotional processing through journaling, and we've seen how they can play out in real life. So now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How can you, the listener, actually use audio journaling, specifically with Chosen, to effectively journal through your own fears?
Right, the practical application.
Sure.
Well, one of the really significant advantages of using an audio journaling app like Chosen is just the sheer ease and immediacy it offers.
Less friction than opening a notebook sometimes.
Maybe, yeah. Especially when you're feeling overwhelmed. So when you're working through that fear-setting framework, you can literally define your nightmare aloud. Just speak freely into Chosen. Describe those worst-case scenarios in detail. Don't hold back.
Just talk it out.
Exactly. The act of verbalizing those fears, hearing them in your own voice, can often make them feel much more concrete, more manageable, and surprisingly, often much less overwhelming than when they're just swirling around abstractly in your head.
And then when you get to the step of brainstorming those repair steps.
Yeah. Use Chosen for that, too. Record your potential solutions, your backup plans. Hearing yourself articulate these strategies, okay, if X happened, I could do Y, then Z. that can really build a sense of confidence in your own ability to cope and problem solve no matter what might happen. It makes you feel more prepared.
Okay, that makes sense. And similarly, when you're focusing on envisioning those positive outcomes.
Yes. Take the time to describe them out loud in Chosen. What would it feel like? What would change? Listening back to your own voice, articulating those potential benefits, those positive changes, can be a really powerful way to reinforce your motivation and, frankly, counteract the often negative bias of our fears. Fears tend to shout louder than hope sometimes.
So true. And don't forget to really explore the cost of inaction by speaking into Chosen about what you stand to lose.
Get specific again.
Yeah. Financially, emotionally, physically, what's the cost of not taking action? Hearing this articulated, again, in your own voice can create a much stronger sense of urgency and help you break through that inertia, that paralysis that fear can often create.
Absolutely. And beyond the structured fear-setting exercise, Chosen is also incredibly valuable for just general emotional processing related to fear. You can use it for that free writing through audio we talked about.
The stream of consciousness thing.
Exactly. Just tap record. Maybe set a timer for 10, 15 minutes and let your stream of consciousness flow about whatever fears are coming up for you. No need to edit. No need to censor yourself. Just talk. The ease of speaking can sometimes bypass that internal critic, that self-critical voice that might kick in when you're trying to write things down perfectly.
Yeah, I can see that. And as the Arista Recovery source highlighted, simply expressing your emotions, speaking about those feelings, I feel scared, I feel anxious, I feel angry about this fear, speaking that into Chosen can be incredibly therapeutic in itself.
Just naming them.
Right. Just naming those emotions out loud can actually help to reduce their intensity, give you a little distance, and foster a greater sense of control over them.
You can also use Chosen quite effectively as your own audio thought diary. Make it a regular practice, maybe daily or whenever a strong fear comes up, to just quickly record the fearful thought and the specific situation or trigger that seemed to bring it on.
Like a log.
Sort of, yeah. Over time, listening back to these short entries can help you identify recurring patterns in your thinking. Wow, I always have this fear when X happens, and then you can begin to evaluate the reality and validity of those fears, much like you would with a written thought diary in CBT, questioning those automatic thoughts.
And here's a really empowering way, I think, to leverage Chosen. Reflecting on past fears.
Oh, using the archive.
Exactly. Use Chosen's search feature or just scroll back, find previous audio entries where you talked about fears you were facing maybe months or years ago. Listen back to how you navigated those situations. What was the eventual outcome? Often it wasn't as bad as you feared.
Right. It provides tangible evidence.
Yeah, real evidence of your own resilience, your ability to overcome challenges. It's like building a personal library of your own strength.
That's a great way to put it. And also, when you experience a stressful event now that evokes fear, take some time afterward, maybe that evening or the next day, to record your reflections on it in Chosen.
Process it.
Process it. Both the Arista Recovery and WCSAP articles emphasize that articulating these experiences, getting them out, really helps in emotional regulation and in processing any associated trauma or lingering stress.
And even a really simple practice of just mindfulness through audio, just taking a moment, hitting record on the Chosen and saying, okay, right now I'm feeling fear in my chest, my breathing is shallow. Just describing your current feelings and any physical sensations related to fear.
Without judgment.
Without judgment.
That alone can bring a greater sense of presence and aid in emotional acceptance, as Arista Recovery pointed out. It's about acknowledging the feeling, being with it for a moment, rather than immediately trying to push it away or getting swept up in it.
So yeah, to kind of bring it all together, fear, it's natural, it's deeply ingrained, it's part of being human. But by actively understanding it, confronting it through structured approaches like fear setting, and combining that with the powerful emotional processing capabilities of audio journaling, we can really start to diminish its power over us.
We can take back some control. Exactly. And using an intuitive tool like Chosen just makes engaging in these practices, well, a lot more accessible and I think potentially more effective for many people.
So here's something to think about. Consider all the energy you might be currently spending trying to avoid your fears, trying to manage the anxiety around them. What if that energy could be directly channeled into actively building the life you truly want?
Redirecting the energy.
Yeah. What small, concrete step could you take today, maybe even right after listening to this, and document it in your audio journal on Chosen? A step towards something you fear, and perhaps, just perhaps, discover that it's not nearly as scary as you imagined.
That's a powerful challenge. And if you're curious to experience the benefits of audio journaling for yourself, to try out some of these techniques we've discussed.
You can try Chosen for free?
That's right. You can try Chosen completely free just by calling our toll-free number. It's 888-576-5669.
Let me repeat that. 888-576-5669. Or easy to remember, 888-JRNL and now W. Give it a call, try it out, and see if audio journaling can help you navigate your own fears.